started off on a positive note. And so coming from Appalachia, we know there are a lot of harmful stereotypes about where we come from. And the same thing goes for Alabama. So I wanted to ask you, what is one great thing about Alabama that everyone should know?
You talking about other than University of Alabama football, I assume, right?
That is,
Yeah.
I feel like that one's the one that everybody knows.
Well, everybody knows that. Everybody knows our colorful civil rights history. But I think what people don't fully appreciate is the natural beauty that we have in Alabama, all the way from the white sands of Gulf Shores and Orange Beach through the mountains up in the foothills of the Smokies. And everything in between. I mean, we have got some of I think Alabama, except for the Great Lakes area, has some of the most amount of lakes and fresh water for recreation of any state in the country. I mean, we've got from literally from one end of the state to the other. And the natural beauty of Alabama is incredible. It is for an amazing enjoyment, for hunting, for fishing, for just recreation on the water or hiking. I think that's the main thing that people don't fully appreciate in Alabama until they kind of drive through it. You see all kind of different topographies and landscapes from the rural areas all the way into the cities of Huntsville and Birmingham and Mobile.
Heard it here first, folks. You should make your hiking trips, your boating trips to Alabama.
Yeah, absolutely. They've even got a canoe trail where you can, in South Alabama, where you can literally traverse some of the rivers. We've got rivers running all through this state, all the way into the Mobile Delta area. And it's just beautiful. I mean, it's just fabulous down that way. And the ecological things down in the Mobile Delta are just tremendous. There's just been books written about that.
Amazing.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned that because it's something that I feel like nobody really talks about. And it's something that I think we talk about on the show a lot. Oftentimes when you encounter people who aren't familiar with Alabama or just the South in general and Appalachia, a lot of their knowledge extends from what color the state appears on an electoral map. And, you know, being from West Virginia, people from Alabama, Mississippi, we have a common solidarity and always being the butt of people's jokes and things like that. But one of the interesting things which Alabama is witnessing now and West Virginia has had a storied history with is organized labor. And so I'm kind of interested in your thoughts on this because, and there hasn't been a ton of mainstream media coverage about this right now, but between Amazon workers and Bessemer trying to unionize and coming up just short, although I'm not sure what the status of the NLRB lawsuit is there, and then the UMWA miners in Brookwood, they're almost nearing their 500th day on strike. Alabama's role in the modern day labor movement, to me, is very clear, and there's a real powerful message there. I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are on all that.
Yeah, no, Alabama has traditionally had a strong organized labor. That has dwindled and diminished some in recent years, but I think you're seeing a comeback in different parts of the state. And, you know, comebacks are slow. I mean, you can't turn around that in a while. And the labor movement did suffer a good bit over the years from, you know, just national politics, local politics, demonization among a number of folks, including, you know, in the political world. I think that is beginning to change. I think President Biden is helping that a good bit because he is actually putting, you know, organized labor front and center of a lot of his policies, which means people are looking at it in a different way. They're looking at it in a more strategic way now. And I also think that the labor movement itself has also shifted somewhat in that it is still focused on worker rights. You still focus on fairness. And that's the whole purpose of this. But I think labor, at least in my discussions, and I got a lot of organized labor support. I used to be a steel worker. I was a union member myself. Most of my family growing up were either coal miners. My granddad was an organizer for the coal miners at one point, and my other granddad worked out at U.S. Steel as a steel worker. So I got organized labor in my blood, but I think that today's modern organized labor leaders are looking at this, knowing that it doesn't have to be an antagonistic relationship with businesses. Organized labor depends on businesses for their jobs. Businesses depend on labor to make the wheels run and to get their profits. So there is a mutual benefit to everyone. And what I've seen in Alabama anyway is that the labor and business have been working together more and more. You still see strikes like you see with the miners. You still see businesses pushing back like Amazon did. But overall, I think the numbers are growing and there's more businesses coming into Alabama. And quite frankly, I think at some point you're going to see more organized labor, and because they're really making a comeback, not only in Alabama, but I think across the country.
Absolutely. And it's good to hear that you're from a union family. My dad was actually a steel worker in southeastern Ohio for 40 years up until just recently.
Cool.
Well, this kind of leads me to, Alabama is a leader in this area, and we're seeing kind of some other Appalachian states who are trying to start the simmer of change in their own states. But Appalachia covers a broad range of area from New York to Alabama and Mississippi. And so we face a lot of challenges with a diversity of issues. So to me, looking at, I just came off of a campaign, working through the primary. And one thing is clear to me is that Democrats ain't winning right now in Appalachia. In fact, recently, and I really resonated with this. You said on an episode of Bill Maher that Democrats have lost their way, and I heard that loud and clear. And so I would love to just hear your thoughts on what do Democrats need to do to regain a foothold within our region.
I think first of all, Democrats have to go where people are. And we have to understand who they are, where they're coming from. And, we have a lot of national Democrats talking about what they're going to do for people, for the poor, for the low wealth, for labor, for the hardworking families out there. But they say it in ways that really bothers people. I mean, they talk about socialism and they talk about other programs. For instance, like organized labor they don't want to do Medicare for all. They've worked like hell to get the benefits that they've got, and they don't want to give those up. And so I think sometimes when I say Democrats have lost their way, they just almost have a paternalistic view of so many people, and they don't really fully appreciate the fact that these folks are their lives are based around their work, their family, and their faith. And Democrats tend to not talk about that enough, and we get lost on cultural issues. We get lost on the abortion issue. We get lost on the gun issue. We get lost on a number of things that I think Democrats just need to go back, and they don't need to, they need to go where people are. But I also think they need to listen, but more than just listen, understand and know that these folks are not all just a bunch of racist, bigot rednecks out there. They're not. But they are they are protective of their families. They are protective of who they are in their communities, and they want to be treated that way. They want to be treated with dignity and respect. And sometimes they don't feel like they get that. And I'm not just talking about the white working class. I'm talking about the working class in general. And I think if Democrats can get back and listen and talk to folks and get them to understand, the one thing that has just absolutely driven me crazy over the last almost 20 years, as we've seen the South and Appalachia and other states tend toward Republican votes so much, is Democrats would look at me and they would say, I just don't understand why all those folks in Alabama are voting against their interest. And my response to them is, who the hell are you to say what their interests are?
Thank you for that.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, we're both like, pray, yes.
Look, people, I think people sometimes have a hard time understanding, but if you think about it, we all have what we would do. We would make certain sacrifices, even economically, if we fully and truly believe in other things. And that's what I think a lot of people have done. Republicans have done a good job of shifting the focus away from the economics and the health benefits, and getting Medicaid expansion and getting good education and those kind of things, and getting good paying jobs as opposed to the minimum wage jobs that so many people have. they've gotten away from that and have focused on the cultural issues, and Democrats just haven't. They look at it and they think if they give them these wonderful economic policy issues that they will come their way. And that's just not the case for a lot of people. They have strong beliefs in these cultural issues, and we need to understand that. That doesn't mean we have to agree with them all, but we have to understand, and I think talk to people about it and try to find a lot of common ground.
Absolutely. I agree with that. And I think that it's something that Democrats have struggled with. I think it's one of the reasons why they've lost a lot of ground in rural America, because a lot of people feel like they're being lectured to at times. And that's just it. Even if you feel like you're right on the issue and you may be right, like lecturing doesn't win people over a lot of times.
No, that's absolutely. And part of the problem too, I think, is that when you do start to talk about things, we've often tended to let the farthest element of the party sometimes dominate the dialogue. For instance, there in Alabama, and I think in probably most of the rest of the country, the abortion issue obviously is a really hot topic issue now. It has been, but so many people are in favor of safe and legal abortions up to a point. And sometimes Democrats tend to want to go farther than that. And when you go farther than that on a lot of issues, people tend to pull back the other way. They just don't want to go there. And we haven't done a really good job, I think, of really talking and understanding and finding that, and I'm not going to use the word middle ground. I think that the middle and moderates have become kind of a bad word right now. And that's unfortunate. And I got a couple of buddies in the Senate that I think are partly responsible for that. But I do think you can find a lot of common ground where people can agree on and start moving forward. It's just that we tend not to want to do that. Everybody tends to go to their political extremes these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. And so many different parts of the country are different politically, and I think Democrats have to learn how to run in different places. You can't run the same campaign and like the Bronx that you run in rural Alabama. It just won't work. And so I think that kind of takes us to a question about.
Can I follow up on that though?
Sure.
Because I agree with you. But the fact of the matter is, those Bronx campaigns, the AOCs of the world, and I have no problem. I mean, I think she and others have very important voices for the Democratic Party, but those campaigns tend to come to Alabama and they come to West Virginia, not of our own doing, but they come because others tag us with those campaigns. Mm-hmm. So we've got to be able to understand that unlike what Tip O'Neill said years ago, that all politics is local, right now, most politics is national. It's a school. Even the damn school boards have become national campaigns. People run against Joe Biden, but for a school board. And I think Democrats have to adapt to that. And part of that is to say, look, in those Bronx campaigns, there are voices there that are further to the left than we are. But guess what? They're also right alongside of us on a lot of issues. Yeah. And together we can make a difference. And I got to tell you guys, we've got to do, I say we, I'm talking like I'm the Democratic Party, and I'm not, but I do think the party has got to make sure that folks with those voices in the Bronx and those people understand that they it can't be a my way or the highway kind of thing. They've got to understand that progress is often incremental. Progress often means finding common ground with folks of a different part of the country, so you can make progress on a number of issues. And we're seeing that right now to some extent with the Biden administration and the success they're having. They're having great success, but it is not it's not the overwhelming change in America that so many people think that we need to have, but it is progress nonetheless.
Yeah, That is really important. I've been talking about this a lot with the kind of the radicalism of who decides in primary voters when they go to the polls. Like like you said, the furthest to the extremes are the people who show up in primaries, and so expanding that electorate is so important, and making sure that these intellectual purity tests are not something that are inhibiting candidates around the country.
Right.
And so I really resonate with a lot of that. And one of the things that I really wanted to touch on, having just left a race where there was a really very troubling, toxic candidate running, you're kind of the archetype for somebody who's run against a troubling and toxic candidate and leveraged their weakness and turned it into a win. And so I'm seeing this in a lot of places as people who are running on the Republican side are more and more in the MAGA camp, more and more have really like things in their background that are coming up that are really upsetting, or they have involvement with January 6th, things that are very bad. And so I would love to hear what you think that candidates who are running against those type of folks should be prioritizing, and what we should be thinking about as we now see a whole slate of really toxic candidates.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a real challenge because people tend to want to talk more about Donald Trump than they want to talk about those local candidates, and they want to tie them to Donald Trump. And I think that that's a mistake. I think they need to try to tie them to who they are, and just because they are bad candidates. They are the type of candidate that should not be in the United States Congress, or should not be sitting in a governor's chair, or shouldn't be sitting as an election supervisor in a local city or county. And Democrats have to do a combination of things, I believe, and that is to, one, contrast that with the candidates that we've got. And forget what the poll numbers show for President Biden. Forget what it says about where the people think that the country is going, what direction it's going in. I think you can say, you know what, I don't disagree with folks that the country's going in a bad direction. And here's why. You got folks like this jackleg who has gotten this nomination running, and this is what they want to do. They want to destroy. He would destroy free and fair elections. This is a group, this is a guy, this is a girl, this is a woman who is running on a platform of taking away your vote if you don't vote the way they want to, taking away a woman's right to choose what happens with her health in her body, taking away your freedom to speak out against the government, like Ron DeSantis, who decided to punish Tinkerbell for speaking out about the Don't Say Gay bill. These are people, this is not the Republican Party of old. Those people are very quiet. They still exist, but they're being very quiet right now. And they're being held hostage by these folks who literally is not the party of individual rights and individual liberties and smaller government. This is a faction now that wants to come into your bedroom, come into your household, tell you what books that your children can read, tell you what history can be taught to your children, whether it's factually correct or not. That's just you've got to draw that contrast. And you do that also by telling people that you as a candidate are going to restore faith in democracy. You are going to build that democracy coalition out there. You're going to restore faith in the institutions of government because you're going to make the changes that are necessary to restore those. And you're not going to just put people down. Y'all can get me going forever. We could speak forever about me telling you things you can do, but I think you get the picture. But we have to be forceful in doing it. And we have to be forceful in offering a vision for this country that is back to a vision that our founders foresaw, that America is an ideal. I don't think Democrats, quite frankly, say enough that this is the greatest country on earth. It is the greatest country that has ever been put on the face of the planet. And we've got to demonstrate that. We've got to be a moral leader in the entire globe. And that means sacrificing sometimes. It means doing the things necessary and also protecting everybody in this country regardless of their status, regardless of the zip code they live in, or regardless of how much money they make or how much the government has to help lift them up.
Yes. Yeah.
Completely agree. I think that the Democrats have ceded the mantle of patriotism. I think not all Democrats, but I feel like a lot, and it's a shame because I think that's something that's a really powerful motivator, and you can advocate for the issues that Democrats advocate for and claim patriotism because it is, wanting a strong working class, want to fight for the workers. That's a strong patriotic thing. And I list them all. I know we've got you for a short amount of time. I wanted to end on a question. What makes you optimistic about the future of Alabama and the future of Alabama politics? I know there's a lot to be pessimistic about, including the former Auburn coach that's currently in the Senate, which, look, I'm a big Nick Saban fan because he's a proud native West Virginian. So
Yeah.
I'm stick with that all day. But what makes you optimistic about Alabama politics?
I just think there's a lot of young leaders out there that are coming up that are biding their time. But our biggest problem in Alabama, from a Democratic Party standpoint, is we had a party that just atrophied over about a 20-year period. Certainly since 2010, we haven't won a statewide election except for my special election. But we got a lot of young people now that are looking. We got a lot of young mayors that have been elected to spots, and city council members, and people are looking at these local races more, and we're building that bench. We reformed the Alabama Democratic Party a couple of years ago. I spent a lot of personal political capital trying to get that done because it needed to be done, and we got new leadership that's done a great job and helped build a party. It hasn't been able to do all we wanted because you just can't hardly do that in the middle of a pandemic. But they are looking. We've got new elections coming up this time, and I'm hopeful that in the next 4 years, the party is going to be such that we will be able to field a really strong slate of candidates and be competitive. I've always said, I don't really care, quite frankly, that Democrats dominate Alabama. In fact, I don't even like the way people say, oh, the Democrats, it was a one-party state with Democrats for so long. Well, I don't really care to go back to Democrats that were Jim Crow, segregationist, Dixiecrats. The party was composed of a whole bunch of different factions, and it really wasn't a party. They just ran under the Democratic banner. And to some extent, that's happening with Republicans right now in Alabama and elsewhere. But I think Democrats are coalescing around messaging. I think that Democrats are coalescing around the issues that are important to people and talking to people about that. So I'm really optimistic because I see a level of enthusiasm, I think, since my race in 2017, even though I lost in 2020. I think people still remember. I mean, everywhere you go, we still hear people talking about the night of that election and the hope that it gave for so many people. It was something I didn't bargain for when I ran, but that hope is still out there, and people are still trying to capitalize on it. But it's just it's a long process. It's a slow process, and people get frustrated. Just, guys, you folks your age especially, okay? And I'm not knocking this, but when you've got phones here that you get instantaneous information and things, you tend to want to have things in the next 5 minutes as opposed to the next 5 years. It's harder to look beyond, and we've got to play long ball here in order to make these changes. And that's what we're trying to do with my PAC, with a C4 that I'm working on, is long-term changes, because they're coming. Our demographics are shifting in the South, younger, more diverse. We just got to get them to vote. We've got to get folks to vote.
Absolutely. And
And by the way, stay engaged, not just vote. I mean, that's the other problem. That's why I appreciate your podcast so much, and others, because we can't just vote and then go home and work and do everything and raise families. We've got to go home and work and raise families and stay engaged in the political process, and make sure people are active, and you're talking about the issues, and you're going to your board meetings, and you're going to your council meetings, and you're keeping people apprised, and you challenge those that need to be challenged.
Yeah. Wow. This has me so pumped. I absolutely love. I mean, this is the message we really want to get out to folks, and especially throughout our region where we know that there is a groundswell of people who are thinking like this. And we appreciate you so much for coming on today. Really.
Hey,
Yeah,
it's been my pleasure,
totally.
guys. Let's do it again sometime soon.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.